We have a bunch of Schiit to cover today. We're going to talk about the new Schiit Wotan. It's a power amplifier. We're going to talk about the new Schiit Forkbeard, which is an app. We're going to talk about how the Wotan sounds compared to the A1 monoblocks from Emotiva. We're going to talk about how to use the Forkbeard app. We're obviously going to talk about how the Wotan sounds. Finally, bonus at the end, we're going to compare it to a very affordable power amplifier. We got a lot to cover, so buckle up, sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about the Schiit Wotan. What is Forkbeard? Well, Forkbeard is Schiit's new app, and it can do a couple of things, but mostly it's a control app. So if you have a bunch of Schiit products, you can put them in different stacks and then control that stack with that app. The easiest way to think about it is a unified remote control on your phone. You can do everything from switching inputs to switching the gain on the preamp. And the Wotan has a couple of options, couple of features that you can switch on and off. It also has a power meter within it. And depending upon what type of speakers you have hooked up, there is a way to see when that speaker is clipping based upon what products you have hooked up to it. Also can monitor temperature. And right now, the products that you can get that have the Forkbeard technology are the Saga 2 preamp, the Cara F Nexus preamp, the Gunyer 2 also works with the Freya Plus tube preamp, Vidar 2F power amp, the Azir 2F continuity power amp, Wotan Nexus power amp, what we're going to be talking about today, and the Kraken 5-channel power amp. Schiit released the Forkbeard app at CanJam, and I got a chance to talk to Jason Stoddard, and he told me that this is kind of an application that is going to have more options in the future. We don't necessarily know what those options are, but the cool thing about this app is you don't have to create an account or anything. It's basically an anonymous app. You just hook it up, turn it on, and it sees your products. So they're not stealing your information. They don't even ask for an email address, which I think is pretty cool. Also, doesn't cost anything. And even though right now it's pretty much just input selection, feature turning on and turning off, and volume control, I really dug it. I like it. I like it a lot. If you are new here, please consider subscribing. We have a whole bunch of videos. It doesn't take any time at all. Donate your subscription today. You have unlimited subscriptions to donate. If you don't like me, if you don't like the show, you can take it back. It's right down here. Come on, you can do it. Click it. Click it. Click it. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. All right, the Wotan is a power amplifier, 2-channel power amplifier that comes in at $1,999. That's a lot, but you also get a lot of power. You get 200 watts into 8 ohms, 400 watts into 4 ohms, and it is basically monoblocks in the same chassis because each channel has its own power supply. Dual mono, comes with their own transformers. 160,000 microfarads of filter capacity. 24 150 watt Toshiba output devices, 7 internal, okay, you can read it if you want to, but it also uses the Nexus differential topology with switchable feedback. This is kind of a cool thing. If you don't want feedback going on, and people use feedback to reduce distortion, there's a little switch on the front of the amplifier, or you can use the app to turn on and turn off the feedback. We'll get into what it sounds like later, but I thought that was pretty cool. Designed and built in the US of A, the great state of Texas. Yeehaw! Got a 5-year warranty and a 15-day return policy, so you can buy it. If you don't like it, send it back. On the back, it's pretty straightforward. You have either a RCA input for either channel or an XLR input for either channel. And then you have a pair of speaker binding posts. There's also 2 fans, and the fans for me never kicked on. I had these hooked up to a variety of speakers, but currently they are hooked up to the Morel Avira bookshelf speakers. Not a crazy hard to drive speaker, but not a crazy easy to drive speaker either. Very cool, typical Schiit design with the heat sinks on the side, very beefy. It weighs in at 54 pounds, so do not drop it on your toe. You will have a bad day. We're going to fly through the Cara F, which is the preamp. On the back of the Cara F, you have two balanced inputs. You have 1, 2, 3 single-ended inputs. You have one balanced XLR output, and then two sets of single-ended outputs. So one can be used for an amplifier, one can be used for a subwoofer if you want to. 3 different gain settings for the preamp. You have passive, you have low, and then you have high. And of course it comes with the Forkbeard. Comes in at $799. And it also comes with a headphone amp on the front, not just a op amp based headphone amp, but what do they call it? Same discrete gain stage used for Cara's outputs, coupled with a smart protection system that guards against headphone mishaps. So, headphone amp too. Alright, how does it sound? Well, I've did a couple of different comparisons here. So what I'm going to talk about now is using a Cambridge Audio EXN100, which is a $1,700 streamer, going balanced out into the Cara F, balanced in, and then balanced out again into the Wotan, hooked up to the Morel Aviras. In a vacuum on its own, I would describe this as typical Schiit sound, a little mid-range forward, a lot of detail in the mid-range, but dynamic when it needs to be. I will say that I think the Wotan is more dynamic than I remember the Vidar being. Now let's talk about that switchable feedback on and off. There is an output level change when you switch it on and off, so it's a little bit difficult to kind of say, oh, it sounds really different or it sounds the same. What I will say is when I had the feedback on, I felt things were more cleanly defined, clearly separated, a little bit more intense. And that was kind of the sound that I liked. When I turned it off, things were a little bit more laid back. I can definitely see where this would come in handy depending upon what speakers you had on there. If you had a speaker, maybe something like the new SVS Ultra Evolution, I would probably use that with the feedback off. Smooths out some of those harsh edges. With a speaker like maybe the Wharfedale Super Linton, I would probably run it with the feedback on. Frankly, I'm running it with the feedback on everything. I like that exacting sound a little bit more. I've always appreciated the Schiit sound because I felt like it was a little bit more mid-range forward. But with this stack, I really kind of fell in love with it because I felt like it was a little bit more dynamic. And this stack really did a great job of forward to aft soundstage separation, largeness, just outstanding. I didn't ever feel like it was a wall of sound. And in the past with some products, it's just like a wall, a flat wall of sound. This was really nuanced. I don't love this comparison because it's not quite apples to apples. We have two mono blocks. Now, technically, since the Schiit has two power supplies or two transformers, it's kind of like a monoblock all in one chassis. But the A1 monoblocks from Emotiva, putting out 200 watts into 8 ohms, but not quite 400 watts into 4 ohms. And the price difference is pretty significant. The A1 monoblocks retail for $500 change, but there's a 10% off coupon. So you're really looking at half the price of the Wotan. Creep by Lena Hall. At the 2-minute 8-second mark, she was way more forward with way more separation in the mid-range on the Wotan versus the Emotiva. Also, less smearing, more cleanly defined. And you also have to understand that I have two sources going into these that aren't really all that great. Really doesn't represent what you probably should be hooking up to the Wotan. The Weem Ultra is fine, it's good, but if you're going to be buying a $2,000 power amp, you probably should put at least a higher end DAC between the Weem Ultra and the Wotan. But I wanted to have an app, I wanted to have as much of an apples to apples comparison as I could. So I used two Weem Ultras going into both amps using the onboard decks. In both the Weem Ultras, I had them connected, and then I did level matching by ear, which I know isn't great either, but those amps had a little bit different gain, so I had to adjust it. Even with adjusting it by ear, you can hear the difference. The Emotiva felt more dynamic on the bottom end and also felt more full in the lower mid-range. And you could just see, if you had your eyes closed, in your head, you could just see the vocalist kind of just poop, come forward like a full step when you're switching it between the A1 monoblocks from Emotiva to the Wotan from Schiit. Intergalactic, punchier on the Emotiva, quite a bit punchier on the Emotiva. Was moving quite a bit of air. Was moving my curtains pretty good with the rear port on the Morel Alviras. Same story though, cleaner through the mids on the Wotan, but there was a hint of sibilance on the Wotan that wasn't present on the Emotiva A1 monoblocks. Harvester of Sorrow, also more dynamic on the Emotiva, especially with the drums. The first 1 minute, there's a big drum kind of fill intro, but the detail on the Wotan, especially with the drums, especially on the toms at the beginning, in the bass drum, there was like this leathery initial attack that you could hear way more on the Wotan than you could on the Emotiva. So that was kind of like, I really like that. The more I listened to the Wotan, the more I liked it. And then I grabbed the Monolith. Monolith is a 2-channel amplifier. It is not fully balanced, so you only have one transformer. And it comes in around $400, but is often on sale for $300. One time I saw it go on sale down to like $210. It was way more similar to the Wotan than I thought it was going to be. More neutral. Even when comparing the Wotan to the Monolith, though, you still had the vocalist or whoever was in the middle of the stage was full step forward. And it was different because the Monolith didn't have nearly as much bottom end as the Emotiva did and didn't sound nearly as dynamic, but it sounded better than I thought it did. And when you're comparing two amps that are a little bit more neutral or mid-range focused, I could appreciate the Monolith a little bit more, and it's shocking that that thing, even at retail of $400, is as good as it is. If you're looking for that super neutral amplifier experience, if you're looking for something that's a little bit punchier, then the Emotiva all day long. But the detail reproduction on the Monolith, it really surprised me again. It was I'm glad I did that comparison today. With the Wotan coming in at $2,000 and the Cara coming in at $800, man, I really enjoyed it. This is probably my most favorite Schiit amp I've heard. I even liked it more than the Tier because I felt like you still get that kind of Schiit house sound, but you also get a little bit of dynamics on the bottom. And I just felt like I could really see into the music with this amplifier. I was really impressed. And depending upon what preamp you put in front of this thing, you can really tailor the sound. But I really impressed with the Wotan. It's expensive. I get it. It's $2,000, but it's got a ton of power. It's got all the cool Forkbeard stuff. And the sonics of it are more closely aligned with what I like from an amplifier. I don't like a neutral amp. And I still think the Wotan's a neutral amp, but I think it has a little bit more dynamics than some of the previous amps. If you like this video, but the Wotan's too much, totally get it. Check out this video about amplifiers my favorite amplifiers under $500. You might get a kick out of it. I talk about the Monolith in this one too. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Binge listen. Maybe through your new Schiit gear. Fill your soul with happiness. With that, I'm Randy. I'm not drinking this. This is old coffee. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.